The sun spilled across the college lawn like gold paint, warming rows of proud parents and excited graduates. Elaine Carter stood near the back row of chairs, clutching her purse to her chest, eyes never leaving the stage. Her daughter Julia was moments from walking across that stage. Her little girl, now a confident 22-year-old woman with honors to her name. Elaine had planned for this day, down to the last napkin at the dinner celebration later that evening. It was supposed to be perfect. At 58, Elaine had spent most of her life caring for others. She'd given up a fast-paced career in publishing to raise Julia while her husband Peter built his financial consulting business. And while the house grew quieter over the years, her pride in Julia only grew louder. Elaine was the kind of woman who sent thank you cards for thank you cards, who ironed napkins and baked from scratch, not because she had to, but because she believed love lived in the details. Peter stood beside her in a navy blazer, stiff but smiling, occasionally checking his watch. He'd always been more reserved, charming in public, cold in private. These days, even his warmth felt performative. Elaine had noticed the small gaps in their conversations, the increasingly late work nights, the way he complimented Julia more than he ever did her anymore. But she chalked it up to routine, aging, maybe even the kind of distance that naturally settles into long marriages. What she didn't chalk up so easily was Marla. Marla Stevens, her best friend of nearly 35 years, stood on Elaine's other side, wearing an ivory shawl that shimmered in the sunlight. Tall, trim, with still blonde hair she insisted was natural. Marla was everything Elaine used to be, confident, polished, a little too polished. They'd met at the town library decades ago, two young mothers juggling diapers and late fees. Their friendship blossomed quickly. Barbecues, book clubs, family vacations, they raised their children together. Elaine had trusted Marla with her recipes, her secrets, even her spare key. But lately, there had been whispers inside Elaine's mind. Quiet suspicions she drowned with logic, like the time she found Marla's perfume in Peter's car. Oh, she rode with me to pick up Julia's cake. Or how Peter lit up whenever Marla came over. He's just happy to see a friend. And Elaine had swallowed it all, because it was easier than facing the ugly truth that sometimes betrayal wears familiar faces. As the first names were called over the loudspeaker, the crowd clapped politely. Elaine forced a smile and joined in, but her heart wasn't beating the way it should. It was cautious, listening, watching. She glanced at Peter and Marla. His hand brushed Marla's lower back as they leaned to look at the program. It could have been innocent. Could have. Elaine's gaze froze. Marla turned her head slightly and smiled up at Peter. It wasn't the grin of an old friend. It was slower, softer. It lingered. Elaine's throat tightened. She turned her head sharply toward the stage, blinking too fast. She could taste the bitterness on her tongue. "Elaine, you okay?" Marla asked, as though she hadn't just smiled at Elaine's husband like a woman in love. "I'm fine," Elaine replied, keeping her eyes forward. Julia's name was called. The crowd erupted into cheers as she strode across the stage, her black gown flowing behind her, honor cords swinging with each step. Elaine clapped, louder than anyone, tears in her eyes, but not all of them from pride. She glanced at Peter again. He was clapping too, but then leaned over to Marla and whispered something. They laughed, quietly, intimately. And just like that, something inside Elaine shifted. Not broke, not yet, but moved. The crack was small, invisible to everyone else, but she felt it like a fracture in bone. Something wasn't right. She didn't know exactly what she would do. Not yet, but she would find out. And once she did, she would not keep it quiet. Elaine Carter had spent nearly 6 decades playing the quiet woman, the supportive wife, the forgiving friend. But today, on the day her daughter walked into her future, Elaine walked out of denial. And when the truth came out, she'd make sure no one clapped. There's a kind of comfort that comes with history. When someone's been in your life long enough, you stop questioning their presence. They become like wallpaper, always there, always familiar. That was Marla Stevens to Elaine, her best friend, her constant, her unquestioned. They met in their 20s, both new mothers juggling diapers and disappointment. Elaine had been recently married to Peter, just a few years out of college. Marla had a toddler and a husband in real estate who traveled more than he stayed. Their friendship began in the most ordinary way. Two tired women at a storytime reading at the local library, exchanging polite smiles and eventually phone numbers. From that point on, they were inseparable. Elaine remembered long afternoons pushing strollers through the park while they vented about everything. Money, exhaustion, stretch marks, the men who didn't understand. They were each other's emergency contacts, each other's safe place. While Elaine's parents had long passed and Peter's family kept a cold distance, Marla became her chosen sister. She never once questioned her. When Julia was born, Marla brought over lasagna and stayed the night so Elaine could sleep. When Marla miscarried 2 years later, Elaine held her through it like a sister would. Their friendship was woven into every major event of Elaine's life. Birthdays, surgeries, funerals. There wasn't a single family photo album without Marla in it. Peter had always seemed fond of her too. Not in a suspicious way, at least not back then. Elaine used to laugh at how the two of them bickered over wine choices or movie endings. It was harmless, even charming. They were close, sure, but nothing more. Right? Elaine used to think that, until the closeness started to hum with something different. It was easy to ignore in the beginning. Marla had a habit of being physically affectionate, touching Peter's arm when she laughed, brushing a crumb off his shirt. She always did that. Elaine never thought much of it. She'd tease Marla sometimes. "Careful, you're spoiling him more than I do." Marla would laugh and say, "Just keeping my best friend's man sharp." It was the kind of joke that felt fine when everything was still innocent. But jokes have weight when they start to feel like foreshadowing. Peter, for his part, had changed gradually. He was never the warmest man. He was steady, stable, the kind of husband who'd never write you a love poem, but would make sure the bills were paid. They had a good life, a predictable one. But in the last year or two, things had started to feel off. Elaine couldn't put her finger on it. Peter would go silent at dinner. He'd stop making eye contact during conversations. He used to check in when he was running late. Lately, he didn't bother. He started hiding his phone screen, something he'd never done before. He said work had become stressful, and she believed him. She wanted to. Then came the canceled plans, the client dinners that ran too long, the extra effort he put into his appearance, suddenly caring about cologne, ironing his shirts more often. Elaine noticed. She always noticed. But noticing isn't the same as confronting. Besides, Marla had her own things going on. Her marriage had been falling apart for years. She and her husband had quietly separated, though she never officially said the word divorce. She started coming over more, bringing wine, asking Peter about stocks, lingering longer than she used to. Elaine tried not to be jealous. That wasn't her style. She trusted them. They were family, weren't they? Still, the air in the room would change when the two of them were alone. And Elaine, once a woman who never doubted her instincts, started questioning everything. "Don't be paranoid," she told herself. "They're just friends. You've known her forever. She would never." But trust is a fragile thing. It's not always broken with a bang. Sometimes it's chipped away in small, invisible cuts. A shared look, a missed call, a whisper between people who shouldn't have secrets. Elaine clung to their shared history like a lifeline. Because what was the alternative? Admitting that the two people closest to her, her husband and her best friend, were capable of betraying her? She didn't want to believe it. Not until the look between them at the graduation day, that moment of too much eye contact, of private laughter, cracked something open. And once it cracked, all the little signs came flooding back. All the ignored gut feelings. All the times she convinced herself she was being silly. All the trust she gave without question. Now, as Elaine replayed those years in her mind, the picnics, the Christmas mornings, the double dates, she wasn't sure what was real anymore. But she was sure of one thing now. If the past was a lie, the future wouldn't be, not on her watch. She wasn't going to be the woman who looked away anymore. Elaine sat on the edge of her bed that night after the graduation, still in her lavender dress, her heels discarded and her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The applause from earlier still echoed faintly in her mind, but so did Marla's smile, Peter's glance, the way they leaned into each other during the ceremony, as if the celebration was theirs. She tried to brush it off. Again. But her body didn't let her this time. There was a weight in her chest that no logic could shake off. So she did what she had always done when something troubled her. She retraced her memories. And that's when the clues began to rise, one after another. Clues that had once seemed harmless, insignificant. But now they carried sharp edges. There was that evening last fall when Elaine had a terrible flu and spent 2 days in bed. Marla had shown up uninvited with chicken soup, cheerful and made up. Elaine had thanked her groggily and drifted back to sleep. When she woke up, Peter was laughing downstairs with Marla. She thought, how nice. They get along so well. But now she remembered something else. When she came down hours later, the soup pot was gone. So were 2 empty wine glasses and a folded blanket on the couch. Marla had said she didn't stay long. Peter said nothing at all. Or that snowy night 3 months ago. Peter had claimed he was stuck at a late client dinner. He didn't get home until almost midnight. Elaine had texted him around 10, but he'd replied only with a busy talk later. When he got home, he was flushed, snow in his hair, and didn't kiss her goodnight. He smelled faintly of Marla's signature vanilla perfume. Back then, Elaine thought, maybe he passed by her street. Maybe they carpooled to a mutual friend's event. But that event never happened. She'd asked around quietly. Nobody knew of it. Another flash. The lipstick. 2 weeks ago, she'd been vacuuming Peter's car. He was notoriously messy, and it had become her weekend ritual, another small act of invisible care. She found a used napkin in the side compartment, stained with plum-colored lipstick. Elaine hadn't worn lipstick in months. Marla, however, wore the exact shade. Hearthfire. She knew because they used to shop for makeup together. It had been her recommendation. Even then, Elaine had said nothing. She tucked it in the trash without a word and told herself, it's probably from Julia or a client's wife. She had become an expert at making excuses. She thought about the texts she'd seen accidentally on Peter's phone, the ones with names she didn't recognize. One of them was MS. She assumed it was a coworker. Now she realized it was Marla Stevens. Then there was the dinner party, just a month ago. Marla came over early to help set the table. She always insisted. As Elaine arranged cutlery in the dining room, she could hear her laughing in the kitchen with Peter. At one point, she glanced in and saw Marla brushing lint off Peter's shoulder, whispering something that made him smile without looking at her. It was intimate in a way that didn't belong in Elaine's home. In front of her. Bold. When Elaine stepped into the kitchen, Marla greeted her like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just crossed a line. Elaine said nothing that night, but something had shifted in her belly, something cold. Still, she swallowed it. Again. Because what was she going to say? I think my best friend is in love with my husband. It sounded delusional, desperate, small. She didn't want to be that woman. But now the memories lined up like bricks in a wall she could no longer ignore. The truth wasn't just whispering anymore. It was screaming. Elaine stood and walked to the bathroom mirror. She looked at herself. Really looked. Her once dark hair had thinned, streaked with silver. She didn't bother to dye. Her skin had fine lines she used to care about, but stopped trying to hide. She had aged while Peter remained wrapped in his crisp shirts and cologne. And Marla? Marla clung to youth like it owed her something. Elaine suddenly realized she hadn't been suspicious because she lacked self-worth. She was suspicious because she knew. Because a woman's gut isn't wrong. It just waits to be heard. And tonight she was finally listening. She didn't have hard proof. Not yet. But the lies had weight, and the weight was now crushing. So she decided no more silence. She would find what she needed. Not to scream, not to rage, but to reveal, to end the pretending. Let Peter and Marla hide in shadows. Elaine was about to shine a floodlight. 2 weeks before the graduation, Elaine woke early one Sunday morning to the sound of birds and a sense of unease. Peter was in the shower. His phone, always clutched like a briefcase, had been left on the nightstand. It was old. A backup, supposedly. He'd recently upgraded to a newer model, claiming this one no longer held a charge. Elaine never touched his things. She'd built her entire marriage on the currency of respect. But something inside her told her not to walk away this time. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers hovering. The screen lit up. One message, just one. Marla Stevens. Can't wait to celebrate her big day. Together, like always. Love you. Elaine froze. Love you? Her eyes scanned the words over and over until they blurred. The casual tone, the assumed intimacy, the suggestion that this was just one in a long string of shared celebrations. Ones Elaine hadn't even noticed being stolen. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She tapped the message. The entire thread opened and her world fractured. There were months, years of messages. Some banal. Peter, bring wine. Same brand as last time. Thanks for last night, still smiling. Some damning. Can't stop thinking about the cabin. She'll never know. We're too careful. You make me feel young again. There were timestamps. Late nights when Peter claimed he was working. Holidays where he'd stepped outside to take a call. Out-of-town conferences that now read like excuses to spend time with her. Elaine's hands trembled as she scrolled. And then she found the photo. It was from 6 months ago. A hotel room. Peter was lying on the bed, half-buttoned shirt, flushed cheeks. Marla was in the frame too, curled up beside him, her head on his chest, smiling at the camera like a teenager in love. Elaine stared at it until her vision tunneled. She hadn't cried yet. It wasn't shock. It was rage. Cold, measured, and rising with every scroll. This wasn't some fleeting affair. This was intentional betrayal, rooted in repetition, in arrogance, in contempt for her intelligence. They weren't sorry. They were careful, and Elaine had played the fool. She put the phone down and walked to the window, gripping the frame. Outside, the dogwood tree bloomed pink like it did every spring. Julia used to sit under that tree and read aloud. Elaine had taken pictures there. Birthday parties, Easter brunches, family smiles. How many of those smiles were already lies? She turned from the window, picked up her own phone, and started taking screenshots. Dozens. Conversations. Photos. Dates. Even one where Marla called her naive but harmless. Elaine saved that one twice. She then printed them out, not to post online, not to scream into the void, but for truth. The kind of truth you hand someone calmly. The kind that speaks louder than yelling ever could. Over the next few days, Elaine acted as usual. She cooked, cleaned, asked Peter about work, hosted Marla for coffee, smiled through each charade. But under the surface, she was memorizing their patterns. Watching the way Marla touched Peter's elbow when he made a joke. The way Peter never said Marla's name when Elaine was in the room. The way guilt made people quieter, not louder. They didn't know she knew. That was her greatest power. She decided she wouldn't confront them in private. Not in anger, not in tears. She'd let the truth arrive in public, at the place where everyone came to celebrate her daughter's accomplishments, where Peter and Marla planned to sit like proud, loyal family. Elaine would break the illusion where it lived, at the graduation ceremony, and she would do it with precision, with dignity, not to embarrass them, but to liberate herself. Because if they had the gall to betray her beneath her roof, among her memories with her best friend, then they could damn well face what they'd done in the light. And when that moment came, when eyes turned and silence fell, Elaine would no longer be the woman in the background. She would be the voice, the line they crossed, the one who refused to vanish quietly. Graduation day arrived with a sky so blue it looked hand-painted, the kind of perfect June weather photographers dream of. Elaine woke up early, her preparations more precise than ever. Every gesture, every step, thought through to the second. But this time, she wasn't just a mother celebrating her daughter's milestone. She was a woman walking toward truth. Julia, radiant and glowing, had already left campus early to prepare for her speech. One of the 3 selected student speakers for the ceremony. Her nerves were buzzing, her voice cracking with excitement when she called Elaine that morning. Elaine smiled through the call, gave her motherly reminders. Speak slowly, look up, and don't forget to breathe. But once the phone clicked off, her face changed. The softness dropped. Her spine straightened. She wasn't just attending a graduation. She was staging a reckoning. She dressed carefully. A soft blue wrap dress, calm, commanding, modest heels, a pearl necklace Peter had given her on their 20th anniversary. The irony of it wasn't lost on her. The envelope rested inside her purse, thick with printed screenshots, labeled clearly, "For Julia." She hadn't written a note. No need. The messages spoke for themselves. At the ceremony, Peter and Marla arrived together, though not too close. Not obviously. Peter carried his usual leather folder, the one he always held at family events to look prepared. Marla wore a pale yellow sundress that showed just enough shoulder to still be called respectable. Her lipstick was the same plum shade Elaine had found on that napkin. Elaine watched them greet people, charm their way through the crowd. Peter had always been charismatic, and Marla knew how to mold herself around people's egos. She was laughing at one of Peter's jokes when she finally noticed Elaine approaching. "Elaine!" Marla called out. "There you are. Can you believe she's graduating?" "I can," Elaine said coolly. "Some of us stayed up for the all-night study sessions." Marla blinked. "Oh, right." She chuckled awkwardly. Peter leaned in to kiss Elaine's cheek. She offered him her shoulder. "You look beautiful," he said. Elaine smiled faintly. "I'm wearing truth today. It fits surprisingly well." Peter paused, not understanding. Not yet. They took their seats in the front middle section, reserved for immediate family and VIP guests. Julia's speech was slotted for later in the program, so there was time to wait. Elaine sat between Peter and Marla, the envelope pressed flat beneath her hand in her purse. She could feel its weight, every lie, every late-night message, every stolen smile, tugging at her skin. She made polite conversation, even complimented Marla's shoes. She leaned in close when she said it, letting her breath brush Marla's ear. The older woman stiffened. "I picked up a pair just like them," Elaine whispered, "but I returned them. I couldn't quite stomach the color." Peter glanced over, eyebrows raised but said nothing. The speaker announced Julia's name. Applause erupted. Elaine stood, clapping harder than anyone. Her daughter stepped up to the podium, a vision in black robes and fire. She looked poised, grounded, confident in a way Elaine had always prayed she'd become. Elaine's eyes welled, but not just with pride, with resolve. After the speech, the families were invited to a small private reception at the banquet hall near campus. There would be food, photos, a toast or two. Peter was asked to speak on behalf of the family. He accepted, flattered, already thinking of the jokes he'd tell. Elaine insisted on giving a toast as well. Marla smiled brightly. "Oh, you have to. You're her rock after all." Elaine met her gaze. "Yes, and you've always been such a close observer, haven't you, Marla?" There was a pause. Peter shifted. Marla's smile cracked just slightly, but it recovered quickly. "Of course," she said, voice lighter than air. At the reception, the guests buzzed with laughter and champagne. Julia beamed, surrounded by her professors, old roommates, and friends. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Elaine walked around calmly, thanking people, hugging those who congratulated her, never once letting the envelope out of her sight. When it was time for the toast, Peter stood first. He delivered a predictable speech, a few jokes about Julia's messy bedroom in high school, a warm nod to her perseverance, a vague, generic tribute to family support. Marla dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Then came Elaine. She rose slowly, glass in hand, her voice calm and clear. "I won't talk long. Today is Julia's day. But I do want to say something, not just to her, but to everyone in this room who thinks they know what love and loyalty look like." The room shifted. People leaned in. Elaine turned to Julia. "My sweet girl, you worked hard. You made it here on your own strength, and I am endlessly proud of you. You've grown into a woman of character, grace, and, most of all, truth." She turned to Marla. "And to my best friend, thank you, truly, for showing me that trust is a luxury, not a guarantee." There were murmurs. Peter stiffened. Elaine turned to him. "And to my husband, thank you for the years we shared. They taught me everything I never want again." Peter opened his mouth. "Elaine," but she raised a hand. She walked to Julia and handed her the envelope. "Since this day is about celebrating all you've overcome, I thought you should know the truth about who stood with you and who didn't." Julia looked down at the envelope, confused. Marla turned pale. What is that? Elaine looked at her. It's your legacy. In print, silence fell like a dropped dish. Peter stepped forward. Elaine, don't do this here. This is exactly where it belongs, she said, her voice even, in front of family, in front of witnesses. Because if you were bold enough to humiliate me privately, then I will be bold enough to expose you publicly. People stared. Julia slowly opened the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. Not yet, but they would. Julia pulled the papers from the envelope with a confused expression. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the gentle clinking of ice in untouched glasses. Her fingers sifted through the stack, text messages, photos, printed screenshots of emails, and as her eyes moved across the page, the smile she'd worn all day crumbled. Peter took a step forward, his voice barely controlled. Julia, that's private. That's not... Not what? Elaine interrupted, turning toward him. Not what it looks like? Don't you dare insult her intelligence like you've been insulting mine. Julia looked up slowly. Is this real? Her voice cracked, louder than the quartet's muted strings, louder than the gasps now filtering through the crowd. Elaine didn't flinch. It's all real. Every message, every meeting. Marla made a soft noise in her throat, part gasp, part protest. Elaine, we can talk about this somewhere else. This isn't the time. No, Marla, Elaine said, locking eyes with her. This is exactly the time. You walked into my home. You sat at my table. You toasted to my marriage while you were sneaking around with my husband. And now you want discretion? Peter stepped in, his voice rising. You've made your point. Don't turn this into a circus. Not today. Elaine's tone was low but piercing. I'm not turning it into anything. I'm simply removing the curtain. People were frozen. Julia was still flipping through the pages. A message from Marla read, she still suspects nothing. We'll celebrate her birthday and then figure out what to do. Another. I think about you when we're all together. It's hard to pretend. And then the hotel photo. Julia stopped breathing for a moment. The weight of it settled like a lead blanket across her chest. I looked up to both of you, she said quietly. I thought you were the adults who kept our family strong. I told people what an amazing marriage you had. Her voice trembled now, hot with grief. You lied to me, both of you. Peter tried to recover. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. Elaine laughed, not a cruel laugh, but the kind born of absolute clarity. Of course you did. It was exactly meant to happen like this. Behind my back, in quiet corners, in the cracks of every ordinary day. You planned it every time you smiled at me. Marla's face had drained of all color. She reached for Julia's hand, but Julia stepped back. Don't, she whispered. You were supposed to be her best friend. You called yourself my aunt. And all along you were... This? Marla's mouth opened, but no words came out. A woman near the back of the room muttered, Jesus Christ. Chairs creaked as people stood awkwardly, not sure whether to leave or stay. Peter raised his voice. This is between us. This isn't Julia's business. Elaine turned on him. The second you involved my best friend and made her complicit in lying to our daughter, it became exactly her business. And now, your daughter knows exactly what kind of man raised her. Julia blinked hard, jaw trembling. I looked for you in the crowd when I gave my speech, she said to Peter, and all I saw was someone who doesn't deserve to call himself my father. Peter's face crumpled, but he didn't move. Elaine didn't let the silence linger long. She turned to the guests, some stunned, some pretending to sip drinks, others slowly sliding their chairs back. I'm sorry if this ruined anyone's appetite, she said, but I decided I'd rather ruin a lie than keep living in one. Then she looked at Julia. You don't need to say anything. You've done more than enough. But I want you to know, I didn't stay silent because I was weak. I stayed silent because I needed to be sure. Julia stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, pressing her forehead into Elaine's shoulder. And for a moment, the entire room watched as truth, raw, unfiltered, and unflinching, stitched something stronger between two women who had just been burned by the same betrayal. Peter turned away, face red, mouth tight. Marla quietly grabbed her purse. No one stopped her. Elaine let out a slow breath. The tension drained from her shoulders like rain sliding off a roof. For the first time in years, she felt tall again. Not loud, not angry, just free. As the guests began to murmur, drift toward the exits, and the soft clatter of dishes returned to the room, Elaine reached for her glass of water, took a sip, and turned to her daughter. "Now," she said, "let's go take some real graduation photos." Julia nodded. "Just us." "Just us," Elaine replied. And this time, there was no one pretending in the background. The next few days unraveled like silk caught on barbed wire. Slow, quiet, but tearing everything apart. Peter didn't come home that night. Elaine didn't expect him to. She packed his things the following morning, methodically, not with anger, but with precision. His suits, his books, his watch collection she'd once polished with pride, all folded into boxes and left by the door. When he showed up the next day, disheveled, eyes tired, shame carved deep into the lines on his face, he opened his mouth to speak. Elaine didn't give him the chance. "There's nothing left to say," she told him. "You made your choices, and I've made mine." He tried to step forward. She blocked the doorway. "This isn't your home anymore." Peter looked stunned, as if somehow, even after all of it, he thought there might still be a conversation to salvage. But Elaine had already grieved the marriage. She grieved it in silence while he was lying to her. She grieved it through every excuse she'd made for his distance. Every lonely night she'd convinced herself was normal. Now there was no grief left, only clarity. As for Marla, she vanished, not right away. First, she sent a pitiful string of texts. "Please don't shut me out. It wasn't what you think. I still love you like a sister." Elaine didn't reply. Then came the final one. "I think it's best if I move away for a while. I'm sorry, Elaine, for everything." By the end of the week, Marla's house was on the market. Word around the neighborhood was that she moved to Arizona, claiming a fresh start. Elaine didn't care. Let her start over, somewhere far from the life she poisoned. People asked questions, of course. Whispers trickled through friend groups and book clubs. But Elaine never defended herself. She didn't need to. The truth stood tall, all on its own. Julia didn't speak to Peter for over a month. When she finally did, it was in short, clipped sentences. She told him she needed time and that she didn't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Peter tried to explain, to justify, but everything he said only made the betrayal worse. He'd thrown away a lifetime for a woman he could have just left her mother for, but he hadn't. He'd wanted both, the illusion of loyalty and the thrill of deceit. That was the part Julia couldn't stomach. "You didn't just hurt Mom," she told him. "You humiliated her. You used her love as cover. That's worse than cheating. That's cruelty." Elaine had never felt prouder. Months passed. Elaine sold the house. Too many rooms full of too many ghosts. She moved into a bright condo across town, near the university where Julia was now doing graduate studies. They saw each other every week. Coffee, dinner, walks in the park. Not always to talk about what happened, but to build something new, stronger and more honest than before. One day, Julia brought over a frame. Inside, it was a photo from the graduation, taken moments after Elaine had exposed the affair. It was just the two of them, arms around each other. No Peter, no Marla, no shadows. Under the photo, Julia had written, "The day we chose truth." Elaine hung it above her kitchen table, and every morning as she sipped her coffee and watched the sun hit the glass just right, she reminded herself. She was never the fool. She was the mirror, the one that forced them to see themselves, the one who didn't scream or crumble, but stood unshaken and handed back the truth like a gift no one wanted, but everyone deserved. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is refuse to be quiet 1 second longer.